Free, free Gaza!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Fight the power, turn the tide, end Israeli apartheid!
Fight the power, turn the tide, end Israeli apartheid!
Fight the power, turn the tide, end Israeli apartheid!
Fight the power, turn the tide, end Israeli apartheid!
I should have probably stayed trying, but I think they would have then just fired me for real. But that is the most powerful time, right? Like, I'm already quitting, so I could have just like...
We need to be flooding her office with phone calls and with emails to say, at the very minimum, you have to demand a ceasefire, but more than that, you have to demand an end to the Israeli siege on Gaza. You have to demand an end to 75 years of Nakba and of displacement, and an end to Israeli apartheid. This is what we need to be asking for, because it's not enough for bombs to stop falling on Gaza. That has to happen. But what happens the day after? What happens to everyone who's been displaced and all those refugees? And we need everyone in our society right now to be standing for justice and standing against Israeli apartheid. So on that note, I would like to invite Reem from the Palestinian Youth Movement to say a few words to us. Give it up.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
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 Palestine will be free!
Bendayan, you will see!
Palestine will be free!
Bendayan, you will see!
Palestine will be free!
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 Woo! My name is Reem. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement. Thank you to everyone who organized this really important action today. Yesterday, I'm sure many of you have been following that the health ministry in Gaza released a report of all the names of the Palestinians who have been massacred by Israel just in the last 20 days. Shame.
Shame!
This report was 212 pages long. 212 pages of names of Palestinian families, Palestinian children. There were 7,028 names in that report, and many more are still under the rubble. Almost 3,000 of them are children. In fact, over 45 entire families have been wiped out. 45 bloodlines have been wiped out. Shame!
Shame!
They have been wiped out by this genocidal bombing campaign, and we must call it exactly what it is, a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Canada has a hand to play in this genocide. Canada is complicit in this genocide. Trudeau is complicit in this genocide. And Rachel Bendayan is also complicit in this genocide. Shame!
Shame!
By being involved in CIJA, a right-wing Zionist organization in Canada that supports the state of Israel, that supports and funds this genocide. We must demand that our elected officials put an immediate end to this genocidal bombing campaign against innocent Palestinian civilians. We must demand that our elected officials stop sending weapons and aid to Israel. We must demand that our elected officials immediately call for a ceasefire. And we must make our voices loud and and clear. Every one of us here has a responsibility to keep fighting and to keep spreading our message and our voice until Palestine is free. Thank you. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Bendayan, you can't hide!
You're supporting genocide!
Bendayan, you can't hide!
You're supporting genocide!
Bendayan, you can't hide!
You're supporting genocide!
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 Woo!
Merci encore à Rim du Palestinian Youth Movement, mouvement de jeunesse palestinien. Et juste encore, c'est super important qu'on soit là en grand nombre demain, 14h, au monument Georges-Étienne Cartier pour une autre manifestation. I think so many of us are just are afraid and devastated, not knowing what we're going to wake up to in the news tomorrow. But I think we can find strength in numbers by coming out tomorrow to support the PYM's demonstration. So I'm just going to give like a short little speech myself. And again, there's plenty of kids activities over here. This is a family-friendly demonstration. You know, a humble gesture that we could do as families living in Outremont to demand an end to this genocide right now. So my name's Aaron Lakoff, and I'm a member of Independent Jewish Voices. I was born just a few blocks from here. I'm from the Mile End, and I come from a family who fled Russia in the late 1800s and fled persecution to try to find a safe place here. And I come here today as a very proud anti-Zionist Jew and as a member of the Jewish community here in Montreal, and someone who I think, you know, I have a lot of grief in this moment, and I'm not sure how to process that, but I think the only way that makes sense to me is by being here with people like you, and being with people who care about justice, and about self-determination, and about freedom. Because I believe in a world free of anti-Semitism and fascism and anti-Palestinian racism and anti-black racism. And I think one of the most horrible and shameful things right now is that people in the Jewish community are like my family are scared, and maybe rightfully so, and there's millions of Palestinians all around the world right now who are scared. And I think the most tragic thing is that people think that we can have a world with safety for Jews at the expense of safety for Palestinians. And that's the tragic compromise of the state of Israel, that there can never be safety for Jews that doesn't also involve and include safety and justice and dignity for Palestinians.
Right on, Aaron.
And I didn't know what to say today coming here, because I've been fighting a lot of anxiety, and every day it feels like there's this rock on my chest, and I just feel like we're looking down the abyss at the worst parts of humanity. You know, you say there's a genocide happening, and what are people doing to confront this? And like we've been saying, our leaders are absolutely absent. People like Rachel Bendayan, who don't have the moral courage to do the bare minimum to stop a genocide when we know it's happening. And today, today is a really hard anniversary for my people too, and for people in my community. Because 5 years ago today, there was a gunman who walked into a synagogue, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, and killed 11 Jews as they were praying. May their memories be for a blessing. And they were killed not only because they were Jews, but because the shooter was a white supremacist Trump supporter who hated the fact that they were doing support for refugees. And so they were victims of anti-Semitism and of white supremacy, and they were victims because they were people who were trying to show empathy and solidarity with people in this world. And in the aftermath of that killing, we had a vigil in Côte des Neiges outside the Jewish Community Center. And so we came together in our grief, like so many of us are coming together here in our grief today. And that day will just stay with me forever, because there were Muslims and there were Palestinians who came and stood there and stood with us in our time of grief at a moment where we felt we were under attack. And looking back at that moment, it's so tragic now, because we know what anti-Semitism looks like. We know it, we've seen it, it's out there. And I am so disgusted every time I hear people like Rachel Bendayan or Trudeau or Sija or apologists for Israeli apartheid or apologists for the state of Israel saying that the PYM or people, Palestinian youth, are anti-Semitic because they're standing up for liberation, because they're standing up for human rights. They are doing a disservice not only to Palestinians and to Arabs and to Muslims, but they are doing a disservice to us as Jews. Right. And they are making this world more dangerous for all of us. I usually don't read speeches, but I had to write down these thoughts. So I wanted to just end with a quote today that I think is really prescient and important. And so there's a famous phrase from Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, who once said, "There is nothing so whole as a broken heart." And like I said, I think a lot of us have broken hearts today. And my heart is broken, like I said, for the victims of that shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. My heart is broken for every single innocent Israeli that lost their lives, for every single Palestinian that has lost their lives. And we have to mention that it's over 3,000 children right now. It's unspeakable. But I think, when we think about there's nothing so whole as a broken heart, I think that it's so important that we keep coming back here and that we keep coming out and showing our solidarity, because I think it's only through coming together and through bringing our grief together that we can start to make ourselves whole again. So thank you so much for being here with us today, for standing with Gaza, for standing with the people of Palestine. And we're gonna stay out here, we're gonna keep making noise so that hopefully people in Gaza can hear our voices. I want to invite up Norma, if she's here. Come say a few words from Activism for Palestine.
These protests really do matter. But one of the things I just wanted to mention briefly, because I feel like all the other speakers have really addressed some of the key issues, is the violence that we're seeing meted out by Israel on Palestinians is not new, and it didn't just start. And we really need to keep this in mind, that this has been going on for over 7 decades. And basically, the people of Gaza have been subjected to a slow death for a long time, but particularly the last 17 years, the current siege of Gaza is a siege whereby Palestinians are being caged with a barbed wire fence, a fence that has sensors, that has machine guns on certain sections of it. They have shortages of food, water, even prior to the attack. Their economy was collapsing. There was shortage of medicine. They were dying a slow death. So, in addition to us today calling for a ceasefire, calling for the immediate, unconditional provision of food, medicine, water, essential life necessities, in addition to calling for these humanitarian corridors, we must call for a stop, for an end to settler colonialism of Palestine, to apartheid. And we must do that through pressuring our government to impose sanctions on Israel. Currently, the Canadian government has a contract with an arms provider, Elbit Systems, a contract of $36 million. This has to end. Our tax dollars are being used. Elbit Systems is producing not just drones, which Canada's purchasing. They're producing white phosphorus. They're producing cluster bombs. They're producing all of the illegal and inhumane and genocidal instrument of war being used on the Palestinians as we are protesting right now. So this is also what we need to fight and what we need to put an end to. So what I'm asking is, let's fight for a ceasefire immediately, and not just after the ceasefire, but let's simultaneously fight to end this apartheid system that we are complicit in, that our government representatives are propping up. First and foremost, our own MP, Rachel.
Thank you so much for that, Norma. Take a position on a ceasefire. Il faut qu'on continue à envoyer des courriels à Bendayan ou à nos députés pour demander un cessez-le-feu immédiat.
Well, I think the importance is we are trying to come together as a community, as families who live in Outremont, but also families from all over the city of Montreal, to put pressure on Bendayan to do the bare minimum right now, to call for a ceasefire, to call for an end to Israeli aggression in Palestine. It's been almost 3 weeks that Israel has been incessantly bombing the people of Gaza. To date, over 7,000 Palestinians have been killed. We know that more than 3,000 of them are children. We have to remember that when we're talking about the people of Gaza, half the population are under the age of 18. So this is a massacre, first and foremost, against children and against innocent civilians. It is not a war on terror. It is not a war on Hamas. And we have to confront our politicians who are telling us lies, who are telling us otherwise, that this is in Israel's best interest or in Israel's self-defense, or that they're doing this on behalf of Jews. Because myself as a Jew, I say not in our name. I say that we cannot have a genocide carried out in the name of Jewish people around the world. And so we're coming here to put pressure on our elected representatives, again, that they call for some accountability to these war crimes and to try to put an end to this violence and to this aggression.
I understand that you mentioned that in the days leading up to this, or even before, that people have been reaching out. What was the type of response?
Yeah, so there was a meeting with Bendayan. I personally wasn't at that meeting. But what I know from that meeting is it was concerned parents and members of the community here in Outremont who met with her to express their demands, that she call for a ceasefire, and she just reiterated her support for Israel in that meeting, and that she said she's listening. And so we're saying, okay, well, we're going to take your word for it. If you're listening, listen to the growing chorus of voices here in Montreal, here in Canada, who are standing against this madness. We're saying we can't allow for 3,000 children to be killed before you take a position. You have to act. And so that's a little bit kind of like the energy that we're taking from that meeting and trying to bring here today.
What is the politicians can have? Like, how can we, uh, yeah, I guess what is the impact?
What is the impact? Yeah. I think it's sometimes hard to gauge, but politicians have to know that their constituents and the people of Montreal stand with Gaza. And I think it's really hard in these moments because I feel like there's no moral courage amongst the Canadian political class to do anything. But we are seeing cracks, right? Like Canada the other day just said, okay, well, we support a humanitarian pause, which is wishy-washy and nonsense. Like, what is a humanitarian pause? What happens after that humanitarian pause? But at least we saw Trudeau shift the slightest bit. And so we have to keep pushing. We have to keep opening up these cracks until the Canadian government finally does call for a ceasefire. And then even that isn't enough, because then what happens after the ceasefire? We have to demand justice and accountability. We have to demand that war criminals like Benjamin Netanyahu be held to account, that people like Joe Biden, who's financing this genocide to the tune of $4 billion per year, be held to account. And so I think that question of like what comes next is also huge, because, you know, we have to say, well, what comes next for the people of Gaza? Over 1 million homeless right now, people displaced, forced out of their homes, entire cities, entire neighborhoods in rubble, right? And so they deserve reparations and justice and accountability. And I think that, you know, the eyes of the world have to stay on Gaza. And sadly, people are really only paying attention to Gaza when the bombs are falling. And so I think it's our duty to not only, you know, mobilize our communities to make sure that people are paying attention, but to make sure that politicians like Bendayan can't ignore this issue.
For a while now, when people do speak up for Palestine, they face negative repercussions, and we're seeing such a large rash like this. People are losing jobs, people are, you know, facing the loss of control. What would you say to people who are seeing these things and so afraid of either continuing their pro-Palestinian activism or speaking out in all as it happens?
Yeah, well, I'd say don't be afraid. Push through that fear. I know this is a very difficult time. I want to highlight one really inspiring campaign, and that's union activists and labor leaders around the country have been pushing unions to take a position to defend workers who are speaking out on behalf, or not on behalf of Palestinians, but for Palestinian human rights, and are facing repercussions. And so the people need to feel that the labor movement has their backs as workers. And so I think that's an inspiring thing, and people can look up Labor for Palestine Canada, which is a coalition of labor unions here in Canada, which is standing up for workers facing repercussions in these times. But, you know, also people like myself who are Jewish, we have to say very clearly that saying free Palestine isn't anti-Semitic, that saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is not anti-Semitic. This is simply people affirming their dignity, affirming their dreams and aspirations for freedom and liberation. And we have to be really clear on what anti-Semitism is and call it out when we see it, but also call out the bullshit coming from pro-Israel groups when they say things like, now they're saying to say glory to our martyrs is anti-Semitic. Well, I'm sorry, but we know that the term martyrs in the Palestinian context refers to anyone who has been killed by the state of Israel. So of course we're going to say glory to our martyrs, and let's say it loudly and clearly and proudly, and affirm the fact that to say so isn't anti-Semitic.